In this lesson, you will be learning how to teach your child G in isolation and in syllables. As you can see by the attached image, this chart puts G at about age 4 for most children. In other words, by age 4, 90% of children can produce the G sound correctly in speech. However, I believe in working with children as soon as possible so they don't develop bad speech habits. The G sound is sometimes mispronounced by young children as D. Your child may say do instead of go, or dod instead of dog. The G sound is produced in the back of the mouth when the back of your tongue pushes off against the very back top of your mouth. So if your child is producing D instead, he is doing what is called fronting, or making a back sound in the front of his mouth. He may also be producing T instead of K because these sounds are just the unvoiced versions of D and G. So to teach your child to produce G correctly, you need to prevent him from keeping his tongue in the front. So if he can already produce the K sound, then it will be much easier to teach the G. Just tell him that the only difference is that G is voiced, your voice is on, G, G, and K is not, K, K. So if he touches his neck while he's making it, he should feel his voice vibrate for G, G, and not for K. If he can't make either sound at all, you may have to bring out a tongue depressor or a lollipop. You can put the tongue depressor up here behind the teeth in the vertical position. Let me show you with Mr. Mouth. So his tongue is going to be trying to go up here for T, 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 or D, 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 d. And you're going to put the tongue depressor right up here to block it. And eventually you can start moving it farther back to where his tongue has to kind of bend back and go g, g, g. So the back part of the tongue, g, 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 is going to touch the top back of his mouth, g, g, g. And the tongue depressor is going to kind of block it from coming forward instead. And you can even have your child hold the tongue depressor so that you can feel like it's more in his control. And these tongue depressors come in flavors. So grape is very popular. You can do that. You can even use a lollipop instead of a tongue depressor. Again, you want to block his tongue from coming forward and touching his teeth. So ask him to try to say ga. And then when it comes forward, he's going to try to say da, but you're going to have to use that tongue depressor to make it go back. So when you're using the tongue depressor, be careful and try not to make him gag because that will just spoil the whole experience and he won't want to try again. So you can let him hold it, like I said, or just be very careful. He probably won't get this right away. You may have to practice this over and over again for a few days or weeks until putting his tongue in the back of his mouth feels more natural to him. So just continue to practice these techniques and encourage a good G sound in isolation. It can also help to show him pictures of words that are minimal pairs. And that just means that these words rhyme and are pronounced the same way except for one letter. So if your child is making D instead of G, you could show him a picture of a deer and a gear. Ask him if those pictures are the same thing, and then explain that unless he makes the G sound correctly, people might think he's talking about deer. So you can have him try to say each word and you can point to whatever comes out of his mouth. So if he wanted to say gear but says deer instead, you would point to the deer. And you can also try this exercise with you saying the words deer or gear and see if your child points to the right word that you said. And this will let you know if he can actually hear the difference between the two sounds or not. So point out that the D sound is made up behind the front teeth and the G sound is made way in the back of his mouth. So once your child can produce the G in isolation with 80% accuracy, or basically 4 out of 5 times, you can move on to syllables like ga, gay, gee, guy, go, and goo. It might help to use a mirror in front of both of you, or at least give your child a hand mirror to look at. And while he's trying to do that, make sure he puts his tongue in the right place to make a good g to start the syllable. G, ah, g, ah. So it might help to make him separate at first and then move them closer together as you practice. G, ah, ga, ga, ga. Then once you can do that like 3 times, then you can move on to the next syllable, gi, and do the same thing. G, e, g, e, gi. You may find that some syllables are easier for your child to produce, and that's okay. You can come back to the harder ones later. Move on to as many syllables as you can, trying to get as many correct productions as possible. When your child can produce those G syllables correctly 80% of the time, then you can move on to initial G in words. From there, continue to work your way through all the G levels as outlined in the How to Teach Your Child speech course. You've got this.